Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and sorry about the delayed start, for we were trying to get our computer working. Okay, I hope you can hear me. I'm really delighted to see so many people here this afternoon, because I'm guessing you're all chevening applicants or potential chevening applicants, and it makes me really happy to see so many people interested in our programme. So thanks very much for your interest. So just to introduce myself, this is my name. I'm Karen Maddox. I work at the British Embassy, and I'm the chevening officer. I do lots of other things as well, but one of my jobs is as chevening officer. And as chevening officer, I am responsible for the chevening policy in Vietnam. So I decide a little bit about the kind of people we're looking for, and along with the ambassador, I select the final candidates. So if you want to speak to the person who knows what we're looking for in chevening, then probably I'm the right person. So this briefing today is about the chevening interview. So just to explain to you why we thought it might be important to hold this briefing, I've been doing chevening interviews for 3 years now, and what I've noticed is that we get lots and lots of good applicants. They look great on the application form, but then when we interview them, certain candidates fail at interview. Now, the candidates who do very well at interview are the ones who are communicators for a living. So the diplomats and the PR professionals, the journalists are brilliant because they're very good talkers, and they can get into an interview and they're very smooth and very charming, and they interview very well. And we were noticing that a lot of people that got through the interviews were these kind of people, and they're great. But we wanted a more diverse range of people. So to get over that obstacle, we thought it might help to tell everyone what we're looking for in the interviews, so that you can think ahead, think about what I might be looking for, and help to prepare yourselves, so that even if you're not a professional talker, you can actually give yourself the very best chance. And the British Embassy will benefit because we'll get to see lots and lots of really good candidates at the interview who are well prepared. So that just summarises that. Okay, so the first thing you want to ask yourself before you come to an interview is, what are they going to be looking for? Because then you need to show me exactly what I'm looking for so that I can select you. So, why does the British Embassy offer chevening scholarships? Now, the chevening scholarships are offered by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, that's the British Foreign Ministry. And that's quite an important point, because it's not offered by the Development Department, it's not the Department for International Development. So it's very different to Australian scholarships, and even some of the American scholarships, because they sometimes tend to focus on sometimes disadvantaged areas and things like that. But our scholarships are not development aid. They're a tool to help us develop bilateral relationships with Vietnam. So they're more political than development, so they belong to the Foreign Office. And just to illustrate that, our chevening programme all over the world includes scholars from South Korea, from Japan, from Australia, and from Switzerland, countries that certainly aren't on our development aid list. So that's just to explain to you what they are. So they're quite political rather than being development focused. And what we want is a network of contacts in Vietnam who are going to be influential in the future leaders in the areas that the British Foreign Office is interested in. So that's what we're looking for. And it's not just people in government, it's people in the private sector and people in NGOs as well as the government departments. So actually you can come from a huge range of different jobs and you still might have something that we're looking for, as long as you think you might be a future leader in Vietnam. Okay, so in practice, I told you why we offer the scholarships. So, in the interviews, we use a very standard, specific criteria that's been decided by London. So I don't set the policy for the assessment criteria in the interview. So everyone who's interviewed for Chevening in every country in the world is judged against these criteria. The first criteria is that the candidate has to show that if they have a scholarship, they would be contributing to the SFO, British Foreign Office, objectives. The second criteria is that they have certain personal attributes. And the third criteria is that they have real leadership potential. So I'm going to go on and tell you a little bit more about each of those criteria. So let's start with the first one, contribution to SCO objectives. Here they are, just to help you. Okay, so this is what the British Foreign Office is trying to achieve all over the world, not just Vietnam, all over the world. And our Chevening scholarships are supposed to support these objectives. So in preparation for the interview, you might want to think about how your job contributes to British objectives, how your career matches these policies. So, in the interview, you'll be able to explain to us exactly how, if we give you a scholarship, you will benefit the UK-Vietnam bilateral relationship. Now, this might look like a very specific list, but it can actually be interpreted very, very widely. So, I'm just looking at some of them. Number 2, the preventing and resolving conflict, which also includes governance, human rights and the rule of law. Perhaps the most obvious thing you might think about that is, governance, rule of law, maybe lawyers, Ministry of Justice, and that would be right. But under that bracket, you could also be a police officer working on human rights issues. You could also work in an NGO that looks at basic rights in poor areas. You could be working in the state bank looking at governance issues. Or you might be working in the corporate sector and you might play a role in sort of promoting fair and transparent business in the corporate sector. So it's actually pretty wide. The next one down, promoting a low-carbon, high-growth global economy, and that one includes 2 types of jobs. The low-carbon, so that's all the climate change type issues. That could include renewable energy engineers, or it could include people on the policy side, so it could include people in the Ministry of Science and Technology, or Monterey, or even the MFA, or something like that. Or it might include some of the private companies, maybe BP. Someone working for BP can show that they have renewable energy experience. And the high growth global economy part of that objective is all about promoting the economy. So economic analysts in the private sector as well as government. So you can see that it's pretty wide. So I hope in your heads now you're thinking, where do I fit into all this? So if you have any questions about that later, maybe we can take some questions. Let's look a bit further down. Supporting British nationals overseas. People might think the most obvious one there is maybe in the MFA because they help us when we have British nationals dying or something in Vietnam, but actually also that could include lawyers because they help British nationals here too, so all sorts of things. Okay. Now the context of this presentation will also be posted on the British Council website later, so if you haven't got time to scribble it down now, you can find it there. Okay, the number 2 evaluation criteria. Personal attributes. Again, this has been set by London, but I think it's a pretty good way to define a Chevening scholar. So we're not just looking for people who are experts in their field. we're actually not looking for people who are great researchers and spend all their time in a library. We're looking for people more dynamic, who are really going somewhere with their lives. They have the qualities that are needed to make the most of their time in the UK and to come back here and to really become a sort of high-flying, influential person. Now, some of this will come across in interview, not by what you say, but how you say it. So if you come into interview and you're very, very confident and you're clearly very focused and ambitious, and you know where you're going and you can convey that, some of that will be in what you say and some of it will be how well you say it. So it's worth doing a bit of preparation beforehand to think about that. Okay, the third criteria that we're looking for is leadership potential. We want future leaders, and we dream that one day we'll be able to say, the President of Vietnam, he was a Chevening scholar. So perhaps that's one of you. Let's see. But not necessarily the President, perhaps the next head of FPT or something like that. You know, future leaders. So this is the breakdown of the criteria that London have asked us to look for. We want influencing and communication skills. Again, actually, some of that comes across naturally by the way you speak to me in the interview. If you can convince me that you're a future leader, then it's quite likely that in 10 years' time you'll convince Vietnamese society and government that you're a future leader, and you're probably going somewhere. So we want people who are just excellent at communicating and influencing. Track record. We want to have a look at what your past experience is in leadership. So make sure that you've got some examples to bring to interview. Now, one thing to remember about leadership is that it's actually different to management. So sometimes when we ask people for an example of leadership, they give us a very good example of when they managed a team. But leadership and management are actually a little bit different. So in leadership, we're looking for people who have shown that they can influence policy. You know, you can show leadership by influencing someone above you to change their policies. You know, that's real leadership. So it's that kind of thing. Now the next one, the existing network of contacts. By that, we're not looking for people who are related to the Prime Minister or anything like that. We want people who can show that in their work they go out and they meet people and they know how to get things done, they know who to talk to get things done, because that's the kind of quality that in the future will make you a leader. So that's why we're not looking for well-connected people, we're looking for people who have the skills to become future leaders. Okay, the next one is ambition. We're looking for people who are very focused in their career. They're ambitious, they're aiming high, but they're realistic, of course. So before you come to interview, perhaps you might want to think about your future plans, if you haven't already, because we will ask you what you plan to do and where you see yourself. We want to know that in 10 years' time you'll be someone that the British Embassy will be really proud to say, yes, they were a Chevening scholar and someone who we're still in touch with. So make sure you tell us about it. Okay. We've got a blank slide. That's not intentional. Right. How do we test these qualities? Okay. This is quite difficult, I think, because you have to show us all of that in 25 minutes, which is probably quite difficult. So we will ask you, within 25 minutes, probably about 8 questions. Some of the questions will ask you for specific examples against the criteria, so perhaps examples of leadership, things like that. Some of the questions will ask you how you might react in a particular situation. So if we want to test things like personal integrity, things like that, then we might ask you how you react. Some of the criteria might be met by the answers on your paper application, so for things like academic potential, we're not looking for that in interview, we know it already. And some of the criteria we will see just by looking at you. We're looking for special people with dynamism and drive, and we'll know that probably the minute you walk in the room. So get it right from the first second. Okay. So having said all that, how to prepare before you come to the interview. So before you, when you're preparing, remind yourself exactly what we're looking for. So look at your notes you're taking now, or look on the website where we're going to put this information, and remind yourself exactly what we want. You need to think about how you fit the criteria and be ready to explain to us. So when we ask the question, you know exactly what we're looking for, and you can tell us. So I hope this presentation has got you thinking already about how you would answer the questions and how you will present yourself as someone that the British Embassy will still want to know in 20 years' time. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Let's look at something a bit more practical now, just to help you prepare. What to expect in the interview itself. Now, the interview panel usually consists of either 2 or 3 people. So there will usually be one person from the British Embassy. I've done a lot of interviews, but actually also my colleagues do some interviews. And the reason for that is, for example, one of my colleagues is in the trade section in the British Embassy, and he's very interested in meeting the candidates who are related to trade. And he is the best person to know what the British Embassy will be looking for from a trade perspective. So sometimes it will be me doing the interviewing for the British Embassy, and sometimes it will be my colleagues working in specific areas, because they're the best people to know. There will also be someone from the British Council there, usually one of either the director or one of the deputy directors. And as well as that, we sometimes have a third member who is a co-sponsor of the Chevening programme. If you haven't heard of the co-sponsors before, they're the people who contribute some funds to the Chevening programme. So our funding comes from London, but also from companies working in Vietnam. And we also give them a chance to sit on the selection panel as well. It means that they can also, we can select people who meet British Embassy objectives as well as their objectives, and they can meet the candidates and decide who to sponsor later on. So they might also be in the interview. The advantage of that is also that they're an outside external person, so you're being assessed very objectively by a good range of people. As I said, the interview will be about 25 minutes, it's very short. It has to be short because we interview about 40 people, and we'd be doing it for weeks if we didn't. We'll be asking you, as I said, there's probably about 8 questions to evaluate you against the criteria. So you'll come in and talk to us. It'll be an informal chat, I hope, and you won't be too nervous. And then when you leave, the panel of 2 or 3 people will mark you independently against each of the criteria. And then they will add up the scores and they'll have a total. And then the panel members will compare and see if we got sort of similar scores, and sometimes we'll negotiate and find a score that we all agree with. We interview everyone, and then we use the numerical scores to rank everyone at the end. So you do your interview, you get a score, and we're not looking at names and who you are, we're looking at numbers. So hopefully it's fair and transparent against the objectives. And we can rank you according to the score you got. Where the candidates are equal, we will rank them under the first criteria. So if we have 2 equally brilliant, dynamic, ambitious leaders, if one of them works in an area that is a top priority for the embassy, then they will be ranked above the other one, which probably sounds a bit harsh, but at the end of the day, that's the objective of the programme, so that's what we have to do. And if there's any argument over that, we take it up to the ambassador and he signs off the final ranking. So it's not me who makes all the decisions, it's the big consultation process, and I'm accountable to the ambassador. And once we've done this process, we'll notify the candidates, usually in about 2 or 3 weeks, but it will depend what's going on and how busy we are, but it should be about 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, so we're coming to the end. I'll go to the final word. I've given you lots and lots of information here so that you can go away and be brilliant at interview, which is great, but it means it will be a very competitive field. Every year we interview about 40 people. This year we had nearly 300 applicants, so 40 people is already a big reduction from that. Last year, our funding from London plus the sponsorship locally only allowed us to offer 10 scholarships, which is tiny, and we'd love to offer more, but last year it was only 10. We haven't got our allocation for this next year yet, but we can only hope it might go up. But in the current economic situation, I think it's unlikely that the Foreign Office will get more money, so we're hoping that we can hang on to 10 scholarships. So you can imagine that if you have 300 applications and there are only 40 people interviewed, we're going to see some brilliant people, but we won't be able to offer them all scholarships. So if you've been invited to interview, if you're one of 40 out of 300 people who've been invited to interview, you're already a success. Okay, you haven't actually failed. You've probably got what it takes, we just can't offer them for everyone. So even if you don't succeed at the interview, you can feel pleased with yourself and tell yourself how great you are. So, it doesn't mean you failed, it just means that we're short of money and, we really have to narrow it down to the very top. So, if you do get a scholarship, of course, you can really feel pleased because that means you're in the top 10 out of 300. But the good news is there's no limit to how many times you can apply for a scholarship. You can reapply at any time. In 5 years' time, you can reapply again. We've removed the age limit for Chevening, so you can even apply in 10 years' time. And perhaps in 10 years' time, you really will have become a leader, and we will say, right, we really need that person on our programme now. So don't be disheartened because it's really not anything personal if you don't go through it, it's just a lack of funding. And we would like to see you again in the future. And that's the end. So I hope that's been helpful and illuminating. I don't want the interview to be a mystery. It's actually, I hope, quite an objective and fair process, and I'd like it to be transparent.